That is the basis of our show, is the unapologetic, unimpeded search for something better than what is already.
This invention is my family's future.
What's wrong with him?
The show does deal with many themes from masculinity, feminism, faith, parenthood, but there's also a big notion of American dream, right? What does the show tell us about that myth, in your opinion?
I think that the dreamers on our show are representative of most families. Thematically, government cheese itself is just a representation of what it means to take nothing and turn it into something. And that requires the ability to dream, to envision, to imagine, to think about what could be. That is the basis of our show, is the unapologetic, unimpeded search for something better than what is already, and the confidence that it takes to dream. Dreaming requires a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of annoyingly optimistic perspective on life, to believe that, yes, I can rise above the circumstances that I find myself in, no matter what anybody says. And that's a major theme of the show, is dreaming.
Paul Hunter based the show on his own family, and your characters, Harrison and Einstein, great name by the way, from what I understand, are a mixture of him and his brother. So what kind of instructions did he give you guys, and what did you do to prepare yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely gave us some homework, gave us a couple films to check out. And I think the biggest resource was just him being on set, because you got to see how he acted and how he moved. And yeah, I feel like that was the biggest resource for me, particularly for Einstein, was Paul himself, just being there and kind of picking up and trying to see what I could pull from just him himself. And he had his brother on set a couple times too,
yeah,
right?
His brother came. We got to meet some members of his family, and it was really sort of serendipitous to see their reaction to us filming and acting out this very, I guess, singular part of their lives, you know, unlocking a lot of these core memories right in front of them. It was really trippy, but so beautiful for us as artists as well.
I also have to ask you about the 60s, because it's my favorite era in American history. Why do you think that the time setting is important in this case? And what was it like for you guys to immerse yourself in the time setting with all the meticulous design, clothes, and details?
I think we are having the fortune of telling a very impactful point in time in our show creator Paul Hunter's life. I think that both he and Aeysha Carr, our co-show creators, were looking at where Paul was, where his family was at this time in an imagined state. And for that time period to also be where the space race was happening, where man was trying to ascend to the moon, and yet there was all of this turmoil happening down here on Earth. It created just the most beautiful pressure cooker of what was getting ready to happen in that next decade of the 70s. And so for me to not have the onus of talking about the trauma of the 60s at that time and the civil rights struggle, but to be able to just examine what a family was during that time and what a woman entering into the workforce in a different position that wasn't just a receptionist, she wasn't just trying to be a domestic. I think all of those things will be interesting for the audience to watch globally, because there is a universality to that was happening globally during that time, not just in America. And so hopefully that is something that audiences will remember, or they will be enlightened by, and also be able to fall into the whimsy and the fantastical reality of the show and the comedy of the show while learning something new.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because there's a lot of things that were happening at that time that I think speak to a lot of, I guess, the Black experience and just how people moved in that time.
Yeah, I think what Ed was mentioning earlier about us not leaning into any of the themes of oppression around that time, and not to say that we're aloof or insensitive to those things, but I just love that we're presenting the story in a way that's not didactic or without leaning into any overly preachy, I guess, messages, and that we're sort of presenting this family as they are without adding any other extra themes to make it I guess, more appealing to a certain audience. You know, the key components are the family and Hampton's journey to spirituality, and each of these characters trying to find their places in the world. And I think it's cool that both of those things can coexist at the same time.
Lucky for me, I've worked on films that were depicted in the 60s before, so I had some experience to fall back upon. So that's a blessing and a benefit for me personally as an actor to be able to draw upon those experiences of shooting in this time period in the past. The 60s had great fashion, fantastic music. They also had a lot of turmoil in the United States and around the world. A lot of people were suffering during that time. And the African American community, there was our civil rights struggle for human rights that was very, very dominant in the landscape of our consciousness during that time. There was also a strong protest movement against the actions being taken in the Vietnam War. And there was a lot of people who were fostering this notion of, being free-minded, open-minded. People were exploring different so-called Eastern practices and esoteric notions. And it was a time that is just always going to be interesting, I think, because of all the different things that were going on all at the same time.
You know, the time setting, I think, lends, the costume and the style of that time gives a gravitas to filmmaking that kind of gives it a weight, gives it an elegance. But then we also took all the themes of what was actually happening in those times. Those coffee commercials are very real. Those old Folgers coffee commercials, we did not do much in the way of just taking what was already there. And then we had the space landing and everything else. But so we did have elements of what was happening there. But I really think for filmmaking, the look and the feel of the 60s, and when you do it, we really walked a line where it didn't come off as too costumey. It came off as real. And I think when you do that, you just kind of infuse this world with an elegance that is beautiful to look at.